I've been working with some people on various issues in their life, just from people suffering from physical ailments to relational problems. And I've come up with some life rules that I'm hoping are helpful. I'm going to run through them. Let me know what you think. Rule number one, know that everyone is doing the best they can to be happy. Everyone's doing the best they can. Now, this is particularly helpful to consider when you think of people that are bothering you, that maybe even more than bothering you think are intentionally trying to harm you. And if you can frame it in such a way that even though they're missing the mark, based on your standards, they are doing the best they can to be happy based on their systems, based on their thinking, no matter how sick or crazy or distorted that they are compared to what we think is right and good. They're still doing the best they can to be happy, or else they wouldn't do it. Even sadists or people who want to get pleasure from hurting other people, they think that's how they're going to be happy. So consider that as people are doing whatever they're doing. If they knew a better way, they'd probably do it. And they're not necessarily just out to get you. They're just trying to be happy. And the reason this might be helpful for you is you're just trying to be happy. How many times have you hurt somebody? You didn't really want to hurt them. It just kind of happened because you're doing the best that you can. There's some really great systems out there so you can learn how other people think. The one I love is called the Enneagram. The Enneagram is a 2,000-year-old system that Catholics have been using to get to the bottom of these personalities that we get fixed into. So check them out. Rule number two, see God or see the infinite creator in yourself and in others, and you can get a glimpse of heaven, really. So the more I can see God in others, the more I can see God in myself, the more I will let go of all these things that might bother me about them. Because in reality, with where I'm at anyway, we're all just expressions of God, very unique expressions. Our human vehicle, this chemical vehicle that we have, would not be animated without the spirit within. And it's so when the spirit leaves, that spark from God, the body doesn't work. It's not alive, right? It falls to the earth and returns to the dust that it came, so it can nourish the ground and the other things that will feed on that dust in the future and become new life. That spark of life is in everybody, is in you, and it's that same spark of life that we all share, and that's the creator. And so if you can see past that personality that people are just borrowing to try to be unique and different, past that is God. So can you see that in somebody else? Can you see that in you? Can you look in somebody's eyes and see the spark of life, God? And if you can pay attention to that, it changes the dynamic immediately in a relationship. That leads to another rule, which is love your neighbor as yourself. Now, if we are connected to each other, there is one self, that same one spark of life is shared. And that scripture becomes literal and not just a nice platitude. I'm loving myself when I love my neighbor. If I think I can take from the other, I'm taking from myself. That same entity, that same life force is shared, and so I end up loving or taking from myself. And that changes everything in a life if I shift that way. So rule 4, awareness is transformational and healing in itself. So awareness, if we did nothing but gave ourselves a lot more grace and started just to watch myself hurting myself, and just stay aware, the natural inclination or the natural movement of a person is towards healing and restoration and life-giving activities. The way that people continually harm themselves through poor choices is they do them unaware. A study that I read about, really simple, is if you count the times, you get really aware and you count how many times you do your bad behavior every day, and you write it down. So whether it's cigarettes or cookies, whatever, say you're a cookie addict, you eat about 57 cookies a day. What you need to do is start counting every day how many cookies you eat and tally them and just become aware of it. And what will happen is you start to become aware of the small motions. That one cookie each day that goes to your lips, you become more aware of it. And the natural inclination that's going to happen is your cookie intake will decrease. It just happens from nothing else than being aware. So give yourself a break, give other people a break, and just become aware of what's happening. You can't control other people, but you can have the appearance of controlling yourself, have the intention of controlling these bad behaviors, and that awareness will lead towards life and health. Next rule, connection is the one reality and source of happiness, and separation is the one cause of suffering. So look for all the ways that we're similar and connected versus all the ways that we're separate and apart. Because the idea of separation is the real source of all our suffering. If I'm separate from you, that means taking from you or harming you doesn't affect me. But that idea of being separate it's made up. It's not true. And all the atrocities that have happened throughout the years is because I think that other person is not connected to me. That other group isn't connected to me. That company over there isn't connected to my company. That people group, that whole race is not the same as my whole race, or that whole belief system is not the same as my belief system. They're different. They're barbarians. The barbarian, it comes from a group of people making fun of another group of people, their language. They sound like ba 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 ba. They're making fun of them, and that's where the word barbarian comes from. They're barbarians because they're different, and they make fun of the differences instead of looking for the similarities. Man, we have so many similarities, all of us human. The same humanoid form and functions and proportions and desires, and we're all like so crazy similar. But yet we go microcosm and look for the tiny variations, and we die over the tiny variations and the differences. I want my tiny variation to be the same for everyone, and if you don't agree about my tiny variation, I will kill you. So just look for similarities. It leads to happiness. It leads to connectedness. It leads to a heavenly life. All right, next rule. Zoom in perspective to intensify experiences. So when you intensify an experience, you make it more vivid for you, the experience of it. And this is a contemplative life kind of thing. So you go out and you take off your shoes and you walk on the grass, and we're going to zoom in on this experience, make it more intense. I'm going to feel how the grass feels on my feet. I'm going to try to feel every blade and the difference in temperature, and if there's any sounds that are being produced as I walk gently on the grass. Instantly, when I do that, I get connected to this moment and I lose everything else. I become timeless. I become zoomed in on this particular time, space, time, and everything else falls away. And it's a beautiful thing, intensifying this micro, tiny moment. And it can become my whole life. And in that whole life, it's almost all empty, but yet it still feels so full. The feel of one blade of grass, it's magical. And I often experience God so profoundly in those empty spaces. So, but if you don't want to intensify and zoom in on an experience, something is bothering you, you've suffered loss, you've suffered anyway, you can also zoom out. So zooming out to alleviate the intensity, to alleviate the suffering, zoom out and get a 10,000 foot view above the earth, or maybe even outside of our atmosphere in space. And you can say, what's the whole thing about? What's the whole thing about being a human about? And in that zoom out process, you can come up with things like, well, maybe all suffering and experience is so that I have the opportunity to choose acceptance and love. If all things came at you easy and what you prefer and full of joy and happiness and tranquility and equanimity, then there isn't much of a need to choose anything that's uncomfortable, which means that we're not going to grow. We're not going to evolve as this separate thing that, which is also not true, but this separate thing that we think we are won't evolve towards our chosen path of really acceptance and love. So we don't have a reason to accept and things that are different, because everything's wonderful. However, if things come at us that are difficult, we have a choice to make. We're not comfortable, so I'm not going to stay in this uncomfortableness. I'm going to choose to get out of my comfort and go into the unknown. I'm going to see my brother and sister suffering, and I'm going to choose to alleviate their suffering, or do my best anyway, however faulty it may be. My intention is, well, I like to help them, and in the darkness we get to move through it into the light and have that experience. A wonderful chance all the darkness is for us to appreciate light, and also to engage with the darkness so that we can move through it into the light. And that's a zoom out perspective of all the bad things that can happen. Another rule: what I have is what I require. Everything in life that I have right now, the people in my life that I have right now, the circumstances that I have right now, are all what I require. This is a big zoom out principle. And that means that this concept of dharma, or programming that happens by us, or at least accepted by us before we even become a human, is working. And that programming brings potential and collapses them into these events that keep on happening to us. Seemingly the same thing keeps on happening to us in such a way that we can't get away from it. Why do these bad things keep happening to me? Which, another word for that could be the karma, the happenings that come from the programming, the potential for particular events is increased because you have programming that tries to make it happen. And in that thing, we get to choose acceptance and love. And that's why I think it's what I require, is because all the things in your life are there so that you can choose to accept them and to love them. Now, once again, it doesn't mean that you have to engage them or keep them going, but I can lower my own resistance to fighting them and calling them bad and hating them and staying in the woe is me, this is happening. Instead, I can accept them as teachers and learn how to be peaceful in the middle of the bad thing, and know that they're my lessons. They're my lessons that really I have chosen on a big way. Next rule: my happiness is my responsibility, not another's. My happiness is my responsibility. Now, this is particularly tricky when you have people in your life that you think it's their responsibility to make you happy. So if you're married, this is applicable. Kids, workmates, the closer the relationship, the more this can come into play. Your happiness is your responsibility. It's not the others. It's not your spouse's responsibility. It's not your workmates. It's not your family. It's not your mom and your dad. It's not your kids, not your fiance, not your boyfriend, girlfriend. And you can hear this come out when people say things like, they make me angry. They make me depressed. If they would only do this, then I'd be happy. If they would only consider me, then I'd be happy. If they would only reciprocate all the things I do for them in some way, then I'd be happy. My happiness is my responsibility. Why do I love? someone else? Well, I love somebody else because it's my choice of how to engage in the world. And I believe we're doing it for the intrinsic value of loving itself, meaning uh, I get rewarded for the sake of loving because of what it does to me. It's not because of what you do in return. Now, I love you and then you're going to love me. That's a trade. It's not a bad trade necessarily. It's still a trade though. But there could be an interaction between you and me that requires nothing from you. That would be unconditional, which is rare. I'm going to love you and you can hate me. That's fine. I may not stay close to you if you continue to hate me, but I'm going to love you the best I can over and over. And I'm going to be happy because it's my responsibility to find that happiness within. Next rule, it's never my job to correct another adult, including my spouse. So this has been a good one. Denise Darlene's book, which is a beautiful book about, all right, last rule for the day, it's never my job to correct another adult, including my spouse. For those who are married, it gets more tempting. Now, this doesn't mean that you don't offer in a loving way what you've been learning and share the the process of growth that you're partaking in. It doesn't mean that you don't open yourself up to them. What it does mean is it goes in with your happiness as your responsibility. It means that you're not there to correct them, your spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend, your friends. It's not your job to go around and making their life right, because their life is right. It's perfect for what they are here to experience. You say, well, it's a mess. Well, it's their perfect mess, because it's working perfectly. If I go around slapping people in the face, people are going to resist me and not like me and run away from me. Why? Because it's perfect, right? It's, of course it's going, we know that we have an inherent knowledge that that's going to happen. Why? Because this is how things work. If you resist and push away and attack others, they're going to have a high chance of wanting to resist and push you away and attack you back. That's just how it works. So it's perfect. It all works so perfect. And if we pay attention, we're going to learn about ourselves. It's not my job to correct another adult. It's my job to pay attention and continually look at the mirror of other people in the world and learn about myself. If everyone I meet in the world is an ass, then I get a chance to consider that maybe there's one common denominator, which is me, right? I'm the ass. It's like the joke. If one person calls you an ass, don't worry about it. If two people call you an ass, consider it. If three people call you an ass, go buy a saddle. This means that it's all a gift. It's all coming to you for our growth and evolution once again. And it's not my job to fix them. It's my job to accept and love them. That's my job. And then from a loving heart, offer what you're learning. That's wonderful. But don't make it a requirement that they learn it, because some people aren't going to want to know what you learn. It's like, hey, I got something wonderful I'd like to share you. Would you like to know? No. I'm going to tell you anyway, because you need it. So have a lot of grace for yourself, have a lot of grace for others. And I might go into these rules a little bit more, but here's the rules again. Know that everyone's do the best they can to be happy. Rule two, see the creator, the infinite creator of God in yourself and in others. Look for it. Next rule, love your neighbor as yourself, this true self, this one self that's shared by all. Next rule, awareness is transformational and healing in itself. Next rule, connection is the one reality and source of happiness. Separation is the one illusion and the cause of suffering. The next rule, we can zoom in perspective and intensity. We can zoom in perspective to intensify the experience of life, and we can zoom out to alleviate the suffering and gain perspective. Next rule, what I have is what I require. Next rule, my happiness is my responsibility, not another's. And the last rule, it's never my job to correct another adult. Hope this has been helpful.